All right, let's bring in political analyst Jason Husser with the Elon Poll. Jason, we've talked a lot over this last week or so about what you were seeing as far as the polling that you were conducting out of Elon and the early voting numbers that came in showing this historic turnout for North Carolina and historic turnout for Republicans, which usually wait until Election Day to vote. You don't seem surprised by this outcome.
The early voting numbers in North Carolina were showing really good signs for Republicans. They were showing the Republicans were outcompeting Democrats when it came to early voting turnout. And it also looked that there were a lot of male voters who had not early voted, which would mean Trump was going to drive up the margins even further on Election Day. The pollsters across the country, myself included, have known we've had a problem with getting a certain group of Trump voters to talk to us. We've done corrections. We've done better in this cycle than we did in 2016. Polls generally told the story of what could happen. Almost all the swing states had polling averages leaning towards Trump, but we still have a problem that Trump voters weren't talking to us, and our corrections worked, but not quite enough.
Interesting. Going off of that, when we talk about the polling numbers, for weeks we've been saying this is a tight race, that it's going to be a close call. You know, back in 2020, we didn't know till days later who won the election. Where do you think Harris fell short, and why was Trump able to edge her out so early? This
was a loss by sort of 1,000 locations. On almost every demographic where Trump needed to do well, he did well, and maybe slightly better than what he sort of expected to do. There's not a single thing I can point to of saying this was the sort of one reason that Trump pushed over the edge, except that Trump has done really well when he's running as an outsider in a time when he can point to problems. And the 2024 cycle is one in which, particularly inflation, is something that was on voters' minds. Trump was able to point to really Biden and say, this inflation happened largely under the Biden administration, and he held the Democrats to account for it. And that's why I think we're seeing the sort of the sweep of the battleground states. Not a landslide, but a sweep of the battlegrounds.
Let's talk about the governor's race. There was a 14-point lead Josh Stein had and still has with 100% now of precincts reporting. He was projected to win this race largely even before the Mark Robinson scandal regarding the CNN report came out. But did you expect this large of a margin for that race?
In many ways, this race shaped out exactly how I anticipated. I thought that Robinson was going to do actually a little bit better than his polling average. We had Stein up 20 points over Robinson. I didn't think those numbers were right because what happened, and we're seeing this in the results, is a lot of Republicans skipped that race. They didn't vote for it, or they voted for a third party. We're seeing more third party voting happening in the governor's race. It's not surprising that this was the outcome. It does seem that the CNN story hurt Robinson even more, but even if that story hadn't have broken, Robinson was on a losing trajectory. It also looks like that the Council of State races that were most tied to Robinson were ones that Democrats did well in. And so the Council of State races where Democrats were able to really run ads of showing the Republican next to Robinson were ones that Republicans ended up losing.
Dan Bishop, for example, you saw Jeff Jackson win that race. We saw a whole slate of Democrats actually now in leadership positions, projected to be in leadership positions going forward. Another example of how North Carolina splits this ticket.
North Carolina has been the ticket splitting state for many years. If you go back to 2004, we saw huge ticket splitting between the Democratic winning governor's race, Bush winning North Carolina by a huge margin. But I didn't think we'd ever see that again, or at least not this soon, because North Carolina is so tight, things are so partisan. But what we saw last night was that a candidate for governor in North Carolina who is deeply unpopular can lead to very different outcomes and really have down ballot effects throughout the whole state.
I want to go back to the presidential election. Over the last couple of months, we've seen both candidates come to North Carolina pretty hard. You know, they were trying to get those 16 electoral votes. Where do you think that the Harris campaign fell short when it came to coming here, or how they could have navigated the North Carolina space?
These campaign visits definitely matter, and the candidates need to do visits. They may as well use all the resources, but it's not clear always that visits are what's moving the needle for campaigns. Really, it's about messaging, about clarifying are things good if you're the incumbent, or about pointing out that things are bad if you're the opponent. So I think the messaging probably had more to do with Trump's victory than the campaign visits. I'm not sure if Harris had done 10 more visits if it had made a difference in the state.
So Jason, stick with us. We're going to analyze the governor's race in a little more detail. Of course, a big win for Attorney General Josh Stein, the projected winner in that race with a significant lead over Robinson. He has 54% of the vote, making this a split ticket. Our Kevin Kennedy reported from Raleigh on what was an exciting night for the governor-elect.
It was certainly a big celebration here in downtown Raleigh last night as a number of people showed up to support all Democratic candidates. The headliner last night is now Governor-elect Josh Stein. A big crowd turned out to support all of the candidates, but specifically to hear Josh Stein speak and hopefully see him win this race. Josh Stein took the stage about 9 o'clock last night, saying that he was honored to be the next governor of North Carolina. He talked about the promise to kind of work together with all parties, all sides of the aisle, to move our state forward. He said he believes that the promise of North Carolina, it doesn't matter where you come from, that shouldn't limit your potential. He talked about investing in all of our state and specifically gave a shout out to teachers. He said he really does, though, want to work together across the aisle to make this state the best state it can be. He then thanked the crowd that was on hand.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is a treat to be with you. Thank you, Governor Cooper, for that very generous introduction. And thank you, North Carolina. Tonight, the people of North Carolina resoundingly embraced a vision that's optimistic, forward-looking, and welcoming. A vision that's about creating opportunity for every North Carolinian.
Now, Governor-elect Josh Stein ended the evening by thanking his campaign staff, saying they worked some long days and longer nights. He then thanked his wife and kids, saying that last night was an opportunity to celebrate, but today it's about getting back to work for North Carolina. In downtown Raleigh, Kevin Kennedy, WFMY News 2.
And Lieutenant Governor and Republican candidate for North Carolina, Governor Mark Robinson, lost that race to Democratic candidate Josh Stein. Robinson says, though, he isn't letting this loss get him down. Listen to what he had to say. After the race was called, he told supporters he wasn't sad. He said there was still a lot left to do as Lieutenant Governor, and he really wants to hone in on helping Western North Carolina get back to normal, among other things.
We've got a lot of work still to do in the sphere of education in these last 2 months. We've got a lot of work to do still for the people of North Carolina. We're going to do it with great energy.
Moving forward with his defamation lawsuit against CNN following a report the network made. The report claims Robinson posted several sexually graphic and racist comments to a pornographic website nearly 10 years ago.
All right, let's talk about one of those key points brought up there, Western North Carolina. We saw huge voter turnout in Western North Carolina. It was even greater than that of the rest of the state. There were efforts, of course, to make sure ballots got to people whose homes were devastated by Helene, to make sure that they could get to the ballot box. We did see Robinson do okay in some of those 25 counties affected by Helene. Why do you think that is?
Hard times have a way to bring people together, and that's what we saw, I think, with Helene. Our polling was showing that people in the hardest hit areas were actually saying they were more motivated to vote and more likely to vote despite the difficulties that they were facing. The areas that are surrounding Asheville are particularly Republican areas. When the storm devastation was becoming apparent, a lot of Republicans were really worried because those disaster counties were about the same margin for Trump that Trump won the whole state by. So it's not surprising Robinson's doing well in those mountain areas that are not the city of Asheville or the Asheville immediate liberal-leaning suburbs. Robinson does have a future ahead, but that path is really unclear. He won 40% of the vote, which means a lot of folks are not done with him, would like to hear more from Robinson, but it's going to be a sort of a difficult journey to manage losing this heavily in terms of what's next for him.
So we have a Democratic governor and then a Republican presidential candidate that will be sworn in next year. With this difference, beyond the CNN report that came out about Robinson, why do you think that he fell so far behind?
Robinson was taking policy positions to the right of the center of the Republican Party. He swept the primaries pretty quickly, but Republicans once again nominated someone who was further right than the center of North Carolina. I think that was his big vulnerability. He took positions that were more extreme than what even Republicans wanted on issues like abortion or schools and a number of other sort of social issues, when he could have been sort of just running much more on, let's have a referendum on how Democrats have done over the last 4 years or 8 years.
I'm looking at the vote totals for president versus governor. 2.8 million North Carolinians voted for Trump for president, but when you look at the governor total, only 2.2 million North Carolinians voted for Robinson. So that support, even with the Trump endorsement of Robinson very early on in this campaign, did not seem to materialize for him in this overall result.
There's 600,000 vote gap between
Yeah.
Robinson and Trump.
Significant.
Some of that's explained by people swapping to Stein, but some of it's also explained by we're seeing higher levels of third-party voting, protest voting by Republicans, as well as people leaving the ballot blank. So these would be Republicans who were thinking Robinson didn't align with their values, but still couldn't bring themselves to vote for a Democrat.
Looking at the lieutenant governor's race, this will be the first time in a while where we have both a Democratic governor and Democratic lieutenant governor. Will that help that party get more accomplished?
In many ways, Josh Stein is as well positioned to make an impact on North Carolina public policy as Roy Cooper was really for only part of his term. When Roy Cooper was governor and Republicans didn't have a supermajority, he was able to at least advance some of the legislative priorities that Democrats have had in the state. We're seeing a similar setup for Stein, but he's also going to have a lieutenant governor in order to back him up. So that means when he travels out of state, he doesn't have to sort of worry about the acting governor being in odds with where he is.
Okay, we are going to pause here on Plus to go to a television cut into CBS Morning. So you'll still see kind of a behind the scenes look of what we're doing as we prepare to go back on TV. And then as soon as that wraps up, we'll join you back here around 7:30 on WFMY Plus. Hope you stay with us.